Om Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Ishvara Guratmeti Mochi Veda Vibhagine Yamadya Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Sava Vedanta Sedanta Gocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Paramanartam Satiguru Pranatosh Maha Om Om Shanti 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 Om Namaste. We are in 5. We begin from the verse 73, right? Is anybody following? Is that right, Lynn?
I thought we covered 73. We're moving into 74.
We already covered the 73.
Yeah, I thought she kind of set it up so that we started a whole new section.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
74. We had to start with a new chapter, identity of you and that. Okay,
that's the good one, because that is the essence of Vedanta, the Upanishads, no? Tattvamasi. So everything just helps us or conduces us to this deeper and clear understanding in regards to the identity between Jivatma and Paramatma, as we know, Tattvamasi. Verse 74 says that if the individual self and the limitless self are inquired into properly, their non-separation is revealed, as pointed out in the statement, you are that. So this is a very, very strange statement that involves a deeper and subtle and careful analysis, because if we read it literally, it makes no sense, because something cannot be something else. When we say you, yeah, you or this cannot be that. Now we say this and that. When we say I, yeah, I, we don't say this, we say I and that. So I and that, or you and that, yeah. I am that, you are that. Yeah, Nisargadatta Maharaj used to say, I am that in his book. No? When we say you and that, this and that, we point out two things, two principles, two factors. So, and there is no such a thing that can be one thing and that, this and that. You understand? This is it's just a contradiction in terms. And so we need to understand what? We need to understand the implied meanings, which is one of the main tools of Vedanta. So what Vedanta means by you and what Vedanta means by that. Because if we take it literally, you can never be that. So we need to understand the subtlety of these meanings of these statements, being this statement the most important statement of Vedanta. No? If the individual self and the limitless self, if they are inquired into properly, following the logic as presented by the Upanishads, their non-separation is revealed, as pointed out in the statement, you are that. So the key here is their non-separation is revealed. Okay, we say you are that, the Upanishad says you are that, but you and that, meaning to say that one thing is the other, means to say that there is no separation between you, the Jivatma, and Paramatma, you and that. Okay, because you are just a simple superimposition on that. Okay, you and your essential nature is but conscious existence, limitless, infinite, yeah? non-limitation. So if the individual self and the limitless self are inquired, their non-separation is going to be revealed. Wow, there is a bird here in the bathroom, which could make a lot of noise for us, or a lot of music. No, he's gonna fly. The aim of Vedanta is to show us that we are not the individual we generally take ourselves to be. The great saying from the Chandogya Upanishad under consideration in this text is you are that. We are told that if we inquire into the meaning of this saying, it will reveal to us the identity of the individual and the totality as non-separate, as the same, the fundamental essence nature of that and you, of Brahman and Jiva are the same, because all is but consciousness. So the totality here means the substratum of the totality. We need to understand this nuance as well. In this text, it presents Brahman, or presents Satchitananda, which presents Paramatma as the totality. We have to be careful because the totality usually refers to the totality of names, colors, and forms, the totality of the manifestation, because only then we can visualize or can imagine, we can project the idea of total, the totality of all names and forms. Okay, when we say totality here, we don't mean that the jiva is equal to, it's the same of the totality of all other names and forms. No? There is a saying, there is a proverb that James likes to repeat, present to us, is that non-duality is not sameness. Oneness is not sameness. So there is a principle that is one, non-dual, but this does not mean to say that in Nietzsche, all names and forms are equal. No, names and forms are distinct, are different, are numerous, okay? But the totality here means the substratum of everything, you know? Totality here means, you know, the space in which all these names, colors, and forms come into existence, okay? So in this Chandogya, in this Vivekachudamani work, the central statement, you are that, being, you know, the core of these teachings, reveals to us the identity of the jiva and the totality as non-separate. So now, how can it not be separate? You know, Brahman and jiva, how can it not be separate? If we say that the jiva is just defined by its body-mind construct, with its attributes, its qualities, its limitations, its functions, its attributes, and so on. And Brahman is attributeless, without name, without form, beyond time, and so on. So how can this be identical? How can it be the same? How can you can be that? You understand? This identity between the individual jiva that feels itself to be limited by the construct of the body-mind. How can it be one? How can it be not separate from consciousness of Brahman? Okay. So the answer is very simple. We are all advanced students of Vedanta. So we know that the common denominator, the common ground, is the ground of consciousness existence, the ground of being, you know, which is conscious existence. This is in which, you know, we can share our identity in Brahman as Brahman, because Brahman is pervading, is permeating, you know, it penetrates, it sustains and maintains everything. So this conscious existence is the substratum on which we appear and we disappear in due time. So in that way, the reality, the identity of the individual is the same, can be determined. The total Brahman is that, you know, that container or that space in which the individual jiva apparently comes into existence and apparently dissolves back into non-existence, apparently. As we know, there is no such a thing as non-existence. But let's go by and by. By and by. This inquiry, however, must be made properly, meaning that the words of the text must be assigned the meaning given to them by the teaching tradition. Difference to the teaching tradition is not mindless obeisance to authority, but reliance on what has been proven true in countless instances over a long period of time. So it's important that in Vedanta, we need to have a certain degree of trust, confidence and trust in the teaching tradition. But this trust, that we have in the teaching tradition does not mean mindless obeisance to authority, but intelligent reliance on what has been proven true in countless instances over thousands of years, It's not the work of a singular genius, but a consensus of countless seekers who have realized the self. In pursuing any science, we do not start from scratch, but rather base our start upon what has been discovered and proven true to date. So here we have Shankara create the context in which he's going to unfold by and by this statement of identity between you and that. Now we are saying that we have Vedanta. Vedanta is a proven teaching tradition that works over a period of time. We have countless examples of people that have come to be benefit and agree with this statement, and I agree with the fact that the logic presented by Vedanta, it is conducive to this inner revelation in regards to the identity between this apparent jiva and limitless Brahman. So if it's not the work of a single person, but a consensus of countless seekers who have realized this statement, I am that. In pursuing any science, then, Shankara says, in pursuing any science, we do not start from scratch. Just imagine that we would try to begin from the scratch and say, no, I don't need the scriptures, I don't need any teaching, I don't need anybody to help me. I'm going to start mathematics or physics without the help of any previous knowledge already established. Okay, so it becomes very difficult. I don't subject my mind to what is already known. I just say, no, I reject everything. I'm going to begin from zero. So I'm going to start observing nature and see until I really discover gravity, and then I start develop some laws and so no, we don't do that. We don't start from scratch. We start upon what has been already known, discovered, established, right? So the same way we do with Vedanta, we take the scriptures to be true because we develop certain faith in the scriptures, and it's so difficult sometimes to people developing faith and confidence in the scriptures of Ishvara because these teachings they are counterintuitive. They seem to be contradictory because it begins to establish that reality is non-duality. You understand? And our perception says that reality is duality. Okay, so there are a lot of reasons why we initially reject and we have trouble to accept these statements of the Upanishads. But as intelligent beings we are, we develop this trust also based on the fact that we see certain statements of Vedanta which are not as radical, and we begin seeing the beauty, the elegance, the complexity, the brilliancy. We start developing this appreciation for this body of mind, for this body of knowledge, to an extent that, and then we can take certain statements that we cannot really digest yet, but we take it on faith. We say, no, and the whole thing is so beautiful, so brilliant, so elegant, and it's working for me. So I'm going to take it, how you say, the benefit of the doubt. Okay, I'll give it the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, I trust Vedanta, so I will stay with it and see if in due time I would fully agree with this statement that I am Brahman. I'm not the limit jiva, but I am the limitless Brahman. So that's the point here. This knowledge, however, if it is to become practical, must be made our own through careful and critical investigation. So this knowledge is not like any other knowledge. That's what Dayananda or whosoever is responsible for these commentaries here. This knowledge is not like objective scientific knowledge, okay? It's not something, it's not academic knowledge, something that you study, you understand intellectually, you hold it in your memory system, and then you say, okay, I also know Vedanta. Now, this knowledge, it needs to be practical. It needs to manifest by transforming the way we experience life, transform the way we interact with the world, transform the way we relate to this body-mind and the other body-minds, and so on. So in other words, it needs to be practical. It needs to be processed, internalized, integrated, so that my emotional personality can be transformed, because that is the main purpose, the main benefit of this knowledge. So therefore, we need to contemplate, study and contemplate and process it internally, very carefully and thoroughly by this critical investigation, following the logic of this analysis presented by Vedanta. So what does the teaching tradition tell us? That is a technical word in Vedanta, not just a demonstrative pronoun, that. That is a technical word. It's a very famous, it's that, It's not just to point to another object, but it's a very Vedantic word. It stands for what? It stands for that which cannot be said to be something in particular. You understand? When you have that which cannot be defined by attributes and qualities and properties because it is attributeless, propertyless, and so on, you stop at that, because there is nothing more you can say but that. Okay, that is a technical word to indicate that which cannot really be described except by the words Sat Chitananda, existence, consciousness, and limitlessness. It stands for the self manifested as the apparent world, that is the totality of all perceptible objects. So now in this text, the Vivekachudamani, it presents that as the totality of the manifest. We need to understand that, because consciousness of Brahman appears to be manifest, appears seemingly manifest as the totality of objects, okay? So what is the totality of all objects? It is Mr. Ishvara. Ishvara is the intelligent cause, the energetic cause, the material cause, and it is the manifestation of the universe. So this manifestation is Ishvara because, as we know, the creator is not separate from its creation. The creator lives within its creation because it holds it, because it's pure knowledge, pure intelligence, it holds the creation, it sustains, it's the fabric of the creation. So Ishvara pervades the entire manifestation, with its knowledge. When we say in this text that the totality is that, because we take Ishvara to be the closest thing to Brahman, or an extension of Brahman, or the representative of Brahman in Mitya. You understand? So this is a concession in this text that use the word that as Ishwara, Ishwara being the totality of the manifest, the totality of everything that exists in the universe. So let's say what it says. It stands for the self manifested as the apparent world, that is the totality of all perceptible objects. Now, Ishwara is sometimes used to describe the self manifested. So sometimes, and in this context, we are using Ishwara, to describe Brahman, Paramatma manifested as Ishwara. So Ishwara is the closest thing to pure Sattva, the cause that appears manifest as the totality of all perceivable objects, is the closest thing to Brahman. Ishwara is sometimes used, in particular in this text, to describe the self under the spell of Maya. The self in association with Maya appears as Ishwara, the totality of the manifest. Are we following? David, not so?
I was just struck by, I just wonder why we have to have Ishwara and Brahman both.
Well, we need to have both concepts, you understand? Because Brahman or Paramatma is the only reality. But whenever Maya comes into operation, it produces Ishwara, Jiva, and Jagata. So let's say the grossification of Brahman, which is not possible, but it's an apparent grossification, turns Brahman into what? Into Ishwara. Okay, the Lord of this universe manifests. So why we have to have both? We could eliminate Brahman, you understand, in our mind and say, okay, all there is Ishwara. Why? Because Ishwara is more tangible. It's easier for us to understand in Ishwara. The concept of God as nature, God as the totality of the universe, you understand? So God as the lawgiver, God as the giver of our karmas and so on. So these notions, they are much more tangible and easier to be being grasped. So we can say, okay, let's just forget about the subtlety of the deep waters of Vedanta when we begin analyzing Brahman as the only reality, and we stay with Ishwara. That's what most people do in the spiritual world, They stay with Saguna Ishwara and they ignore Nirguna Ishwara. You understand, David? So, are you following?
It's you're saying Guna Ishwara, it sounds like the same thing to me.
Okay. There are, we call it Nirguna Brahman or Nirguna Ishwara and Saguna Brahman, Saguna Ishwara. What is the difference? The difference in Nirguna, Nir goes for no, okay, without. Nirguna is Ishwara not colored by the gunas, meaning to say Ishwara in no association with Maya. Maya, fundamentally, it is this mirror-like, apparatus constituted by the three gunas that produce Ishwara, Jiva, and Jagat. Okay? So when we say Nirguna Ishwara, Nirguna Brahman, means to say Brahman without association, without contact, without the influence, okay, of the three gunas. So that is said Nirguna Brahman, Nirguna Ishwara. So this is the only reality, okay? The essential nature of everything. That is Satchitananda. Its existence, consciousness, whose nature is limitless, or Ananta, okay? Satchitananda. So Now, we have, when Maya comes into operation, we have what's called Saguna Ishvara. What is Saguna Ishvara or Saguna Brahman? The Ishvara, the creator of the universe, the sustainer of the universe, and the destroyer of the universe, these three deities, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, okay? So when we have Brahman associated with the gunas, we have a large variety of gods according to what? According to the worship of all jivas. The jivas, they want things. And ultimately, they want a pure sattvic mind. And they are going to relate to all different symbols of Ishvara, of Saguna Ishvara. Ishvara colored or designed or determined by qualities and attributes, which makes up all these celestial gods, these different gods for all kinds of jivas needs, requirements, tastes, desires. You understand? So this is Saguna Brahman or Saguna Ishvara. Okay? You understand the distinction, Dave? Now,
I don't know. Maybe it's not that important, or at this point in time. But yeah, I don't know. It's very subtle to me, and going to a level of depthness that I'm like, why is this important? So,
well, why it is important? It's because it's important to understand Nirguna Ishvara, because Nirguna Ishvara or Nirguna Brahman is the only reality, Dave. And Saguna Brahman, Saguna Ishvara, okay, it's just as unreal as the Jiva. The unreal appearing Jiva, looks for salvation, seeks salvation with Ishvara, the manifest God called Ishvara, the Saguna Ishvara, which is Ishvara colored by the gunas, manifests by association with these gunas that makes it a dense entity made out of pure knowledge and intelligence. So this is all within the realm of Nitya. Nitya is composed by Ishvara, Saguna Ishvara, Jiva, and Jagata. All of this is Nitya. So now we cannot tell that to everybody, because if you tell to the common spiritual people that God is not real, God as we know it, you understand that Krishna is not real, the Vishnu, Shiva, none of these entities, deities are real, you understand? If you tell that, people say, oh, no, that's why Vedanta only tells that down the road, farther, once the mind of the individual became more subtle to understand the distinction between Saguna Brahman and Nirguna Brahman. So, but why we need to understand Nirguna Brahman? Because Nirguna Brahman is the only reality, and you are that. I am that. Are we on the same page? Do you understand, Claudio? Yeah? You understand? So Ishvara manifest is very, very important to be understood. Jiva needs to position itself within this relationship with the Saguna Ishvara, Ishvara, the Lord of Nitya, and Jagata, the Dharma field. And the Jiva needs to take this Saguna Ishvara into account and live in accordance with its laws. What for? Not for moksha, not for really direct self-knowledge, but for mental purity, mental refinement, mental emotional. So it's essential to understand Saguna Ishvara. Huh? But that is not the end goal, okay? The end goal is to understand Nirguna Ishvara, regardless of its subtlety, as the only reality, because it is Nirguna Ishvara that is the substratum of Saguna, Ishvara, Jiva, and Jagata. Okay? So we need to understand the essential nature of all there is in Mithya, the same way that the space is the essential nature of all objects, because all objects are pervaded by space. Okay? So the same way, Nirguna Ishvara is the essential nature of Mithya, and in Mithya we find these three principles: Ishvara, Jiva, and Jagata. Yes, Luciana?
It's very clear, all your explanations very clear. Just having a problem with the names here, because to me, Saguna Brahman does not exist, because then it becomes Ishvara, or I'm wrong. It's like Brahman doesn't have any contact with the gunas, because once Brahman is in contact with Maya, then becomes Ishvara, or I'm wrong.
No, it's just a question of different names. The same way we have Paramatma, Brahman, and the Chaitanya, and so many names for Brahman, you understand? We have different names for Ishvara as well. Now, all these deities and so on. And then rather sometimes Ishvara, generally speaking, we in Vedanta, we present Ishvara as this Lord, the Lord of this universe manifest. Once consciousness associates with Maya, the gunas, it brings about the Lord. What is the Lord? Is the intelligent, efficient cause of the universe, okay? It's this being made out of pure, conscious, self-conscious knowledge and intelligence, with the power to project as well the universe through these gunas, okay? So we have Ishvara, and this Ishvara usually refers to the Lord of the manifest. But in some texts, they use the same word Ishvara referring to Nirguna Ishvara, okay? In some texts. And then what James did down the road, what he came to try to help people to resolve this confusion, he started creating my confusion, calling Ishvara 1, Ishvara 2. You remember that? Huh? Ishvara 1, Ishvara 2. So it is a good attempt to solve this problem. But what is Ishvara 2? 1 is Nirguna Ishvara. Okay? Nirguna Ishvara, Ishvara not associated with Maya. What is Saguna Ishvara? Is Ishvara associated with the gunas, which is equal to say to call Nirguna Brahman and Saguna Brahman. So if we want to call Ishvara, without the gunas, Ishvara with the gunas, or Brahman, which usually is the word we use for consciousness not associated with the gunas. So Brahman and Ishvara, or Nirguna Brahman, Saguna Brahman, Nirguna Ishvara, Saguna Ishvara. Does it clear now? Okay, Dave? Okay. So here, Ishvara is sometimes used to describe the self manifest. Okay? Ishvara, in this context, Ishvara is the self. Ishvara is Brahman, is Paramatma. Is sometimes used to describe the self in association with the gunas. So now we have Ishvara, the self. Ishvara, as we know, is the Lord of this universe. Is consciousness associated with the gunas, and it appears as the totality of all perceivable objects. It's the manifestation of consciousness in association with the gunas. Okay? So therefore, Ishvara is sometimes used to describe consciousness manifested. How consciousness manifests? Through the association with the gunas. Okay? Maya. Huh? So when we contact Maya, the aspect of Maya, which is almost like pure sattva, brings forth what? Ishvara. You understand? This Ishvara is consciousness of Brahman you know, in association with the gunas, colored by the gunas, Saguna Brahman. So a lot of the times, it's this in this text, it presents Ishvara as Brahman and Ishvara as a totality of all perceivable objects. Okay, that is the thread, the line, the sequence of logic to understand this word that is a bit confusing when it says that you are the Jiva and that is the totality, because the totality of all names and forms, it's a little bit confusing because you say like, okay, I am the totality. What it means to say, I am Lynn plus David plus Claudio plus Luciana plus Marcos plus Silvio. I'm the totality. So it sounds a little bit strange, doesn't it? No, the totality here means consciousness represent as Ishvara. Ishvara meaning to say the totality of everything that brings forth through this association between Brahmana consciousness and the gunas. Is it getting more clear, David?
Yeah, I think it's getting more clear. And I mean, I get hung up a little bit. I can't spell Naguna or Naguna Ishvara. I don't know how to spell that. So.
Nirguna, N-I-R.
N-I-R?
N-I-R Guna, Nirguna. And Saguna. Saguna is Ishvara or Brahman in association with Maya, meaning to say in association with the gunas. Okay, so let's move on here. Ishvara is sometimes used to describe the self manifested. We have used Ishvara before to mean the cosmic order which governs the way in which objects interact. You see, when we say that Ishvara, when we try to describe Ishvara, we can see Ishvara from the standpoint of this intelligent order, this knowledge, intelligence, which structure this universe by its laws. You understand? This is the efficient, intelligent cause of the universe. So this is the Sattva aspect of Ishvara. Ishvara as pure Sattva is this intelligent, beautifully intelligent designed order, okay? Created by all these laws, okay? All physical, chemical, and karmic, and otherwise laws and rules governing the experience, not only the Jiva's experience, but governing the entire universe of all inert objects as well. So we have already used Ishvara previously, meaning to say is this cosmic order, okay? This intelligent order which structures the universe, which governs the way in which every object interacts with one another, okay? So this is the order, this is the intelligence. So now this is one way to look into Ishvara, okay? Ishvara is the manifestation, the physical, material, and subtle manifestation. Ishvara is this intelligent order, okay? This sattva, okay? So Ishvara is also the material cause that comes about together with the energy to project it, to produce Ishvara as the manifest totality of perceivable objects as well. So these all are different ways we look into Ishvara. Saguna Ishvara, Saguna Ishvara. And Saguna Ishvara here is present as an extension, so to speak, of Nirguna Ishvara, or a representation of Nirguna Ishvara. Okay? So now, U stands for the individual, as we understood, because this statement is aiming the Jiva the individual jiva. This statement is not aiming any other jiva but the human jiva. It's not a statement the scriptures are addressing to cats and dogs or cows or anything. It's for the human jiva. It says you, you and that are the same thing, are not separate. Okay, so we're gonna understand better the logic as it unfolds. U stands for the individual jiva. What is the individual jiva? Is the collection of physical, mental. Let me see if anybody shows up. No. So what is the, let me do it here, because Mark may show up soon in here. Not yet. So what is this individual? The jiva is the collection of physical, mental, intellectual attributes. In other words, it's our gunas, our constitution. So the gunas mixed up with the elements is going to create all kinds of objects. Among them, the jivas, the human jiva objects, and every object is defined by its constitution, in the proportions of the gunas with the elements. We have all these infinite numbers of human jivas. It's a collection of physical, mental, emotional, and intellectual attributes with which we identify, meaning to say, it is our body, mind, emotional personality, intellectual personality, physical personality, intellectual and emotional and so on, personality. Now, we understand our personality to be separate from the totality of objects. So this I that we refer ourselves to, So when we say this word I, what do we think about this I? This is a good contemplation. I will say this I. So what am I referring to? Am I referring I, the physical body? Am I referring I, my emotional condition at this moment, Oh, because now I'm so sad today, I'm a little bit depressed, and so this is I. So am I describing, am I referring to my how you say, my status, my profession, my bank account, and so on. So there are many different ways that we refer to this I. So generally speaking, is the ego, is the Mr. Ego, that which feels itself to be, a person, an identity defined by its life story and the way he sees opinions and notions and intellectual personality, the emotional personality, one's memories and histories and stories of life and so on. So this is the ego. Now, we understand this ego, this personality, to be separate from the totality of all objects. Yeah, of course, the ego, the sense of doership, ownership, and which defines itself by identifying with all these different functions of the physical and subtle bodies and causal body. This ego, it of course, it does feel to be separate from all other objects, right? It's a very complex object, the human jiva. Due to this intellect, it makes it very complex, and then he believes that somehow he's the center of its own universe. He's the subject, and he reduces, or she reduces all other objects to objects, and himself as the subject. So this ego, it believes to be separate from all other objects. We look at the cosmos, we look at the universe, the stars and the planets and the earth on which we are standing, and we see ourselves as separate from this grand show, to be small, isolate in respect to it all. So this is this position of the jiva. Just imagine how small and insignificant a jiva feels before, the vision of the universe, of the four corners of the universe, as we develop more knowledge of astronomy and so on. So the jiva feels really an insignificant dust, in this immense, vast universe. And of course, he, he believes that everything exists outside, separate, distant, by him. Why? Because jiva, by definition, is that I that is totally identified with the body mind. This identification with the body brings about this sense of time, space, and isolation, separation, vulnerability, fear, I'm feeling like, oh my God, just imagine, I'm alone here. I came in here alone. I'm going to go alone. And the universe is vast. And I heard that God can help me, but I don't see God. I heard that I can meet God, when I die, but nobody gives me any certainty about that either. So it's a very tough position, the human jiva. It's a very complex kind of psychological condition, all due to this identification with the body mind, which is the definition of the ego jiva. This consciousness identified with the body mind. It believes to be separate from everything and sees the whole grand show, and it feels very small and isolated and shaky in fear, before the vastness of the totality. Now we are coming to the totality of the manifest. The jiva is an integral part of the totality. Once it is identified with the body mind, the mind is going to allow this identification to take place. The identification is going to be with the body as the body. It's going to feel very, very limited and small, okay? And it's going to feel frightened. So this is the jiva, the condition of every jiva. Now, in which way this jiva relates to the totality? The verse tells us that we are mistaking this vision. In fact, the Upanishad declares 9 times in the source text, the source text of this Vivekachudamani the source text is 600 and something verse. This is a book which was a selection of verse made by Swami Paramarthananda on the request of Dayananda many years back, when Dayananda was going to present Vivekachudamani, and he did not want to go through all those 506 or something verse, and he asked Paramarthananda to do this selection. But it says here that, in fact, in this text, the original source here, this fact, Tattvamasi, Jivatma, is Paramatma, was repeated 9 times. The individual and the totality are one, Tattvamasi, that thou art. How can this be true? We may wonder, how can it be true? I feel myself to be the body. I, through my mind, identify with the body. I see the vastness of all other objects out there in this planet, out there in the skies, in space, and how I can be the totality. How can I be that vastness, that totality? So that is the difficulty of any individual coming in contact with the Upanishads, before one develops the refinement and subtlety of mind to grasp how this small little thing here can be equal to the totality. But here it says that the source text here has repeated this 9 times. How can this be true? We may wonder. On the face of it, the saying seems absurd. It sounds illogical. No, it seems to be like, wow, this is, these people may be tripping on some sort of drugs, because how can the jiva be the totality, I mean, it makes no sense. So the jiva feels so small. But the Upanishad is insistent that the declaration must be accepted by the jiva as a fact. Okay? So, but of course, this declaration cannot be forced on anyone. It needs to be gradually understood, and then internalized, not understood only intellectually. Sometimes it even seems like to be a wishful thinking or wishful poetry, a metaphor for something, like when a national leader says that he's one with his people. That's very common in politics. Oh, you are my people, we are one, and I'm going to work for you. It seems to be an hypocrisy or something of that sort, But the Upanishads is insistent that this declaration must be accepted as a fact by the jiva. So if we accept this means of knowledge, now we go back to the Shraddha, because in the beginning, these statements of the Upanishad, they're very difficult to be accepted. They are too subtle, they appear to be too vague, too abstract, too counterintuitive, and contradictory at times, absurd at some other times. So, and then we have to understand that trust comes into place in those moments when the mind is not subtle or refined enough to really, really understand these subtle statements. Then we need to bring forth our trust, our confidence in this teaching. It says, okay, if I'm not really yet, totally getting it and claiming my identity as the totality, it means that my mind still requires a little bit more of refinement and purification. That is the proper attitude of a mature individual who understood the beauty and the value of this body of knowledge called Vedanta. And whenever it still is not fully appreciating these statements as a fact, it needs to understand that the defect is not in the statements of the Upanishad, but possibly is due to lack of further refinement. This is not blind faith. This is intelligent, mature intellect, and humble, which is a great qualification. So if we accept this means of knowledge as true, we must accept the declaration as it is intended. The individual and the totality are one, meaning to say not separate. So that and I am not separate. Therefore, we are one. We are just, it's difficult to say one, the notion of oneness, but we are getting there. We are going to understand these apparent contradictions, these limitations of language, by understanding the implied meaning of words, which is a very important tool in Vedanta. To inquire into this statement properly, we must find a common ground of these two seemingly disparate terms. And this we do following the method prescribed by the teaching tradition, which will be unfolded in the following verse. These teachings now, they are very, very beautiful. They're a very nice analysis. Now I remember, very analysis showing, how we can find this common ground, what is common to both you and that. We're going to reject, that which is not common to both. We're going to follow here. Verse 75. the oneness of you and that. So the oneness, the non-separation of you and that is established by their implied meanings. Yeah? So we need to look into the implied meanings, as I said, not by their ostensible meanings, which, like the wave and the ocean, indicate mutually opposite qualities. Okay, so we have these different samples or examples or metaphors presented by Vedanta, one of them being the waves and the ocean. So we know that the waves, they are defined by their size, their volume, their speed. So all of that, for anybody who have surfed before, we understand what is a wave, and sometimes they come out of nowhere and they become giant, and so on. So all those things are going to define a wave. But when we say that the wave is not by the ocean, we say, well, it does not make much sense because the ocean is vast. The ocean does not really move. The ocean does not grow and shrink. The ocean does not begin and end. And yet, the wave is bound by time and it's defined by all these qualities and, as I have just mentioned. So it almost seems that they are mutually opposed qualities. One is that oneness and vastness of the ocean and limitlessness of the ocean. And the other is the wave, which is small, it's limited, it's temporal, and so on, I'm about. So how can the wave be the ocean? We are here, going through this analogy, which is the same situation here. How can the wave be the ocean? The oneness of you and that is established by the implied meanings of you and that. And for that, we need to make use of all this Vedantic metaphor. And then we bring, Shankara brings the wave and the ocean again, indicating that it appears to be absurd to equate the wave as the ocean, as equal to the ocean. But when we understand the meaning, the implied meaning that says the wave is the ocean, we are not saying that the wave, this phenomenon that comes, grows, shrinks, and dies on the beach, we are not meaning a wave, this temporary, phenomenon, but we are meaning what? We are meaning the water of the wave. We are not meaning the wave, but the water of the wave. And the water of the ocean is one and the same. Yep. Words may be understood. Okay, now Mark has come. I want to say hi to him and explain him the situation. Hello, Mark. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Arlindo.
Okay, so I want to apologize, but I couldn't contact you. I sent you a message by. What is this? I tried to reach you by email. The time in Europe changed, and then I was in between the time in Europe and the time in USA that did not change. And then I opened the class at the time, the unchanged time of Carbondale, and most people showed. And then I decided to begin earlier today for you. And as a result, we are already 1 hour into the class, but everything is being recorded, okay? Did you hear me, Mark? Did you?
Hi, Arlindo. Yeah.
You heard me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I got your email, but just 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, this is one time situation, because next Sunday the time in the USA changes as well, and then we will be back in the same page. Okay, 8
Okay.
in the evening and noon in Carbondale, and then whosoever is in between, like me in Brazil, and then I adjust to the time.
Okay. And on Thursday, Arlindo, what time will it be? Will it be an hour earlier?
No, from next week, it's again back 8 p.m. European time, okay?
Talking about this Thursday.
Okay, but the Thursday class.
Okay, and that's a good point. Thursday, we're gonna have this problem again, and I'm going to calculate everything and send it in the mail in tomorrow, okay?
Okay, great. Thanks.
You're saying something, sir? No. So, words, we are the verse 75. The oneness of you and that is established by their implied meanings, not their ostensible meanings, which, like the wave and the ocean, indicate different or opposite qualities, you know? So when we look into the ocean and the wave, we have a hard time to understand that the wave is the ocean. Understand? But then we need to understand what the scripture means when they use this analogy of the wave. Of course, the scripture means the water of the wave is the same water of the ocean. Therefore, we find what? We find a common ground to define the non-separation or the identity between the ocean and the wave. Okay? Words may be understood in either their literal or their implied meanings. So if we say, for instance, the room is very noisy, this is a nice example. Yeah? We say like, so the room is very noisy today. So nobody is going to believe that the room is really making any noise. So everybody will understand that the people or the dog or the cat or the birds are making noise. And they say, oh, the room is really noisy today. So we do that all the time, okay? We correct the words, this communication, you know, the way we convey our thoughts to one another. We discard the literal meaning and we take the implied meaning. So we do it all the time in our conversation. No? We discard the literal meaning and we extract the implied meaning. So we're going to understand with Vedanta, and we naturally are going to begin doing all those things. Otherwise, we would go crazy. Because again and again, I'm talking to people, you know, and then sometimes I'm talking to some Vedantic friends, and then I don't know when I say I, my body, when I say I, my notions, I, my emotions, or I, the self, you know, and then with one another, we need to understand. If Lucy start talking to me and say, I'm having some problem with this and that, so I know that she refers to our subtle bodies, our mind, our emotion. No, I don't take her to say that, you know, the self is having any problem or physical body. So we have to, naturally, we do this distinction between the language, you know, and what we mean from behind the language, you know. We have to be very careful. Somebody told me the other day something that it was very close to an old example of Ramji, and somebody told me, let's see if I remember. I don't remember, but it was an example. Oh, I remember now. But anyhow, Ramji had an example. They say like somebody comes to you and say, oh, David, you are looking very smart today. So what's the implied meaning of that? It means that today David is looking smart, but yesterday, who knows what is in the mind of the person who made that statement, you know? So you are looking very healthy today, Mark. So it means to say that, I'm sorry, but you were looking a little bit sick before. Huh? So we know very well what is a literal and implied meaning. If we say the room is noisy, we mean to say the people in the room is making a lot of noise. So the implied meaning of saying, of the saying you are that, is that, no, that the room is noisy, is that the room is occupied by people who are making a lot of noise. When literal meaning makes no sense, we resort to implied meaning. When we do that all the time. Understand? When the literal meaning makes no sense, our mind corrects it. Understand? And then once we move into Vedanta, we have to correct ourselves, because we say like, oh my God, I'm so fat. And then immediately I have to remember, hey, I am the self, and I'm never fat or skinny. You understand? So I was referring to my body. Therefore, now that I stand in the self as the self, I have to correct my language and understand, I discard this literal meaning, or I would discard the implied meaning and take the literal in that sense. It would be reversed in this example. So now the literal meaning of you or that makes no sense. In fact, the two terms understood precisely in opposition to one another. And the jiva is very small, a little thing in this vast totality of all perceivable objects. I am an individual to the extent that I am separate from the totality. So now how I'm going to make peace with the statement that I am the totality? If I am defined by one small little thing in reference to the totality, right? So it does not make any sense. It seems to be absurd. So the literal meaning of you must be rejected. Okay, the literal meaning of you as the body-mind construct must be rejected. I, the body-mind, must be rejected, along with its literal equation with that. So the literal meaning of you must be rejected, along with its literal equation with that. That is Ishvara manifests as the totality, okay? In its dynamic manifestation, this intelligent order, as we said, as the ruler of the cosmos, the lawgiver, the Kamapala Datta, and so on. The law that governs the interaction of objects, including our bodies and minds. You is the individual subject to Ishvara. So now how can the individual, which is subject to all these laws of Ishvara, be Ishvara? It does not make any sense, okay? So you must be rejected along with this literal equation with Ishvara. So this literal equation with Ishvara also needs to be rejected. The idea that I have of I as the body-mind must be rejected. Otherwise, there is no way that I can make sense of this statement. So let's go slowly here. So you is the individual subject to Ishvara. He or she who is compelled to conform to the law, despite Ishvara's law, of course, despite one's personal likes and dislikes. So there is a great and obvious difference between the totality, the power, the all-knowingness, the all-intelligence, this beautiful, intelligent order, and the jiva who knows almost nothing about himself and the universe, okay? There is an obvious difference between the Ishvara and the individual that makes the saying, you are that, appear to be absurd, to say the least, okay? So the verse offers an analogy that further illustrates the contradiction. That is likened to the ocean, you to the wave. The wave is certainly not synonymous with the ocean, nor vice versa. So we must set aside the literal meaning of these two words. Okay? We need to set aside the literal meaning of the wave, as we know wave to be a wave. We need to set aside the literal meaning of the ocean, okay, as the totality of all waves, and we have to extract the implied meaning of both the wave and the ocean, because only through the implied meaning of both we can make sense of this identity, of this equation, U equal that. We can only do that by reject the implied meaning of both and extracting the implied, the ostensible, and extracting the implied meaning of both. So we must set aside the literal meaning of these two words if we are to rescue the saying from absurdity. Nice, as we can save this statement from being crazy, we need to do that, set aside the literal meaning of both words. We are told that the oneness of you and that can be established by their implied meaning, to which the text now proceeds. I find this passage in this Vivekachudamani very, very nice. So now we're going to keep proceeding. So we go slowly until we understand, how this is something that we do all the time and how we need to extend it into the scriptural knowledge so that we can develop this vasana to reject the literal and extract the implied meanings in the context of these statements of the Upanishad. Verse 76. The difference between the individual and the total is caused by the difference in upadhi. So now we bring the concept of upadhis. Maya is the upadhi of Ishvara, the cause of the total, and the 5 sheets are the upadhi of the individuals. Okay. So Maya is the upadhi of Ishvara. What it means to say, the gunas, you understand? The gunas, they are going to color, or the attributes of the gunas are going to be apparently transferred to Ishvara. Okay, in the same way, the apparent attributes of the 5 sheets are going to be transferred to the Jiva Atma. Okay, so the difference between the individual and the total, this apparent difference between the individual and the total, is caused only by the difference in upadhis. Ishvara, being the totality, okay, has as upadhi Maya. Okay, Maya, being the 3 gunas, is going to color Ishvara. Let's remember the definition of upadhi. Okay, let's remember the classic definition. We have a red rose, and we have a crystal, and then in close proximity, the redness of the rose appears to be transferred to the crystal, and then we see the crystal as a pink or a red crystal. Okay, so now upadhi is that which apparently is that quality or property which appears to be transferred to something else due to its close proximity. The close proximity of Maya and Brahman, okay, Maya and Ishvara, makes Ishvara appear as receiving or having the qualities and attributes of the gunas transferred to Ishvara, to Brahman, and Brahman, Nirguna Brahman appears as Saguna Brahman. Understand? So Maya is the upadhi of Ishvara / Brahman, and then it appears as Saguna Brahman. It's still Brahman, appears as Saguna Brahman due to the upadhi of Brahman, which is Maya. The same way the individual Jiva, due to these 5 bodies, the 5 sheets is another way of subdivide the 3 bodies. We can divide the 3 bodies as the 3 bodies, or we can divide the 3 bodies as the 5 bodies. The 5 bodies, nothing but the physical body, and then the prana body, the emotional body, the mental emotional body, and then the intellectual body and the causal body. Okay, it's a different way to divide the bodies of the jiva. Okay, so these different bodies, we can look into it as the three bodies or the five koshas, the five sheets. It's so closely, intimately associated with jiva atma that its proximity, makes these properties of the five koshas to be transferred to jiva atma, and the jiva atma believes to be its properties and attributes. I am what I think, I am what I feel, my this physical body that I carry around, my dreams, my memories. So the jiva atma, due to these five bodies, these five koshas, these upadhis, okay, these properties get transferred to the jiva the same way the properties of Maya get transferred to Brahman, so that Brahman appears as Saguna Brahman. So therefore, Maya is the upadhi of Ishvara, and Ishvara is the cause of the totality, which appears as the manifestation of the totality. And the five sheets are the upadhi of the individual jiva. And upadhi is that which makes something appear to be what it's not. For example, given in an earlier verse was that the rose and the crystal, the red rose and the crystal. Okay, the proximity of the rose makes the crystal appear to be red. When the rose is discerned, when the rose is known to be in close proximity, we recognize the redness to be a misinterpretation, a misapprehension, and we realize that the crystal is colorless and transparent. We then know the crystal's true nature, even if the appearance of redness persists. How nice is this one, huh? Then we understand the true nature of the crystal, although the crystal will continue to appear red. Why? Because my wife put a vase of red flowers next to my crystal. So now my crystal seems to be red. So I understood that the redness is a quality inherent to the redness of the rose. So, and then I can, my colorless crystal is there appearing as red. Okay, so now I see, Nirguna Brahman appearing as Saguna Brahman. Now I see Nirguna Brahman, Nirguna Ishvara, Nirguna Brahman appearing as the jiva due to its association with the five bodies, the five koshas. So the five koshas is upadhi that brings forth the jiva atma. Jiva atma is atma in association with these upadhis called the five sheets. Ishvara is paramatma in association with the three gunas of Maya. Is this clear? Any doubt, Dave? Okay. When the self, we then know the crystal true nature when we, even if the appearance of redness persists. When the self, as reflect awareness, identifies with the five sheets, the food body, the vital, the mind, the intellect, and the bliss, the causal body. When the self identifies with these five sheets of the jiva, it considers itself to be the jiva atma. Paramatma falls to believe that it became the jiva atma. Okay? What is the common denominator between Paramatma and Jivatma? Atma. Jivatma, Paramatma, the common ground is Atma. Okay? When the self identifies, when it shines in the five sheets, when it shines in the subtle body, it identifies immediately with these five bodies, and then it feels itself to be an individual jiva. This means it assumes it has a location in space and time. So now the self is under the spell of Maya, avidya, and identifies with the five koshas, feels itself to be located in time due to the identification with the food sheet, the food body, the body, the physical material body, immediately produce this misconception that I have a location in time due to identification with my food body, okay, food sheet. It conceives itself to be an indication, an individual, and it assumes a location in space and time. It immediately feels to be subject to birth and death. It's subject to joy and sorrow. It feels to be the doer, the enjoyer, and the sufferer. It's totally caught up in samsara chakra. It's totally caught up into delusion, okay? Due to this identification with the five sheets. So this is describe the Jivatma, you, as the doer and enjoyer of your actions, the Mr. Ego. Each of these sheets has been examined and proved to be the not self in the previous verse. So in the first 50 verse, we went through all the five sheets and we were just rejecting the five sheets, all these different bodies, all these different levels of identities, levels of experience associated to the I. Okay, we have already discriminate and reject all of that. Okay, in the previous one, the previous verse. So this means it assumes a location. Each of these sheets has been examined and proved to be the not self. But so long as they have been negated, the self will continue to identify with an individual body mind. But so long as they have not been negated, as long as we don't really properly negate it, so how can we properly negate it? When we negate it with full conviction, full understanding of the logic present, and sometimes we need to do it over and over again. Why? Because Maya is hardwired, ignorance is hardwired, and it's going to compel us again and again to identify with the five sheets. Okay? And then again and again, we have to go back to this knowledge until it becomes a hard, fast, all the time present, not subject to forgetfulness and remembrance. Okay? So we have to go back because Maya is persistent. Its ignorance is really hardwired. So to the extent that we do that, and then we properly assimilate this knowledge, okay, and then we can say that this five sheet has been negated as the not self. That's the point here. But as long as they have not been properly negated, the self will continue to identify with an individual body mind, and it's going to feel caught up into the space time, samsara. When we think we are the body mind, we see the world. That is the upadi of Maya appears. So Maya, the upadi, the Maya, all the totality of perceivable objects as a part to separate from myself. I am this small little thing, and the vast cosmos with infinite numbers of universe, and then I feel very small, very insecure, very vulnerable, in this vast universe. This is the tough, frightening condition of the human jiva. All of that due to this body-mind identification. The notion of the individual gives rise to the notion of a world of perceivable objects, as the verse said. For what is the individual if not the separation of perceived objects into two categories? This is a very nice logic. What is the notion? What is the notion of the world, of the universe, which is but all the totality of perceivable objects, you know. What is that but a separation, but the separation of perceivable objects into two categories, those with which I identify and those we see as separate from us. Very nice, huh? So there are two kinds of universe, of objects, the ones that we identify as I and mine, so my body, my mind, my hair, my glasses. No, the glasses became part of me. No, so I and mine, and then everything that does not define I and mine, everything that's not within the realm of I and mine. No? So those we identify with are the objects that constitute this I and mine, and those I see as apart and away from us. As individuals, we regard everything from the standpoint of the body-mind we identify with. Everything that's not part of this properly defined I and mind, body-mind, we say that is the world. I and that, the totality of all objects. I'm still seeing myself as a jiva here. I, the jiva, defined by my bodies, my identity, okay? And every object that appears within the scope of my mind, I see my body, I see my thoughts, I see my emotions, I see everything, but I'm totally identified that constitute my I, okay? And the things that are not much identified. Of course, some people identify with their spouse, with their house, with their social position, with their profession. There are a lot of ways we identify with objects that fits into the sense of I and mine. You understand? When we begin to speculate about how the individual in the world came to be, and such speculation leads to the notions of a creator God or a Big Bang evolution. So we then begin to speculate when we find ourselves in this situation. I and mind, everything that defines myself and the rest, the totality. Then we get so frightened, we begin to speculate about how the individual and the totality, and such speculation leads to the notion that there is a God, or a Big Bang or a process of evolution, and there is me. So those are all notions, conceptualizations that somehow we develop as a means to feel some comfort, because otherwise we feel really frightened, and insecure. And Vedanta leads us through a process in which the sheets that constitute our very sense of individuality are negated. We're going to negate this very, very, very fundamental structure of these five koshas, the five bodies, by which, we define ourselves. All these five different levels of human experience by which we define ourselves. Vedanta presents these teachings, as a means to facilitate the negation of this identification. We realize that we are not the body. We are realizing then that we are not the vital air. So we know the body is an object, right? Because we see the body. We realize that the pranas, the physiological autonomous systems, we witness, we observe them, we perceive them. So we cannot be what we perceive, what we know, what we experience. So we know we are not the physical body. We know we are not the prana body. We know we are not our thoughts, feelings, and emotions. Why? Because I am aware of them. My emotions are not aware of me. Therefore, the emotions, feelings, and thoughts, they are objects that appear to me. Okay, so we know that these are objects. We know that the intellect and the ego, the sense of doership, are also objects. So I have developed this objective view of these five koshas. And we know that all of these come and go. These levels, this experience of identify with these different aspects of human experience, they're fleeting, fleeting, yeah? Fleeting experience. So we experience it here. In one moment, I'm totally identified with my profession, and then with my emotion, and then with my intellectual notions, and then with my physical body because I went to the gym. So we are all the time, it's just changing, okay? Our identifications, okay? They keep changing. We realize that we are not the body, etc., etc. And all of these 5 bodies and these 5 levels of identifications, they come and go, they keep changing. We realize then that we are the changeless, conscious, witness, subject principle, in which all these transient phenomena called the upads appear and disappear. Okay, so here we have the teachings being contextualized. Oh, there is still quite some. Oh, there is a lot to go in this logic here. So that we are coming to the upads. When the individual is negates, what happens to the totality of all objects? We might say, yes, I can see that my individuality was an illusion, but what about the cosmos? So this is going to be a long story here, and we're going to stop here and leave the continuation of this analysis, okay, for next week. We are just on the verse 7.6, looking into the difference between the individual in the total in association with the upadis, the upadi of the total, of Ishwara, and the upadi of the Jiva, meaning to say the 5 quotients. Okay, so we carry on next week from this analysis here. I'm going to make a sign here. So I send you an mail tomorrow with this recording, especially for Mark or whosoever did not show up. And we meet again on Thursday, and I send you the exact timing for each one of us. Okay? Om Purnamada Purnamida Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, everyone. Namaste. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Namaste.
Thanks, Arlindo.
Thank you,
Bye now.
Mark, for showing up. Bye-bye.